Can you talk about the '96 draft and a once-in-a-lifetime player like Allen Iverson?
I mean, so I was with the league at the time of the '96 draft, so of course I know that's Allen's class, and he was the #1 draft pick. I mean, I can't say standing here today I have a much more of a recollection. If you could go through for me for the class, but I know it was a wonderful class, and Allen was the #1 pick, and obviously demonstrated that he was deserving of being the #1 pick that year.
What does he mean to the league? A player like Allen?
I would say for Allen, this is now putting on my fan hat. I mean, he was, he defined the player who so-called left everything on the court. And I remember even in the early days of Yao Ming in China, everybody was always surprised when we'd say, no, Yao Ming didn't sell the most jerseys in China, Allen Iverson did. And I think it's because people could relate to him in a way they couldn't necessarily relate to the big men in the league. I also think Allen began a trend in this league. If you look at some of the very successful smaller guards right now in the league, Chris Paul comes to mind, Damian Lillard comes to mind. I think Allen Iverson was a player that those young men looked up to when they were coming along, and they inspired them, to become the great NBA players they are.
Do you remember? I'm sorry. Do you mind from that question? Do you remember some of the headaches that Allen brought to you?
No. No, Allen was a special player. He was, and he's a unique personality. But the great things he did for the league far outweighed the occasional headache.
Commissioner Mike Sealski from the Philadelphia Inquirer. In retrospect, can you kind of judge or evaluate the change in the culture that Allen had both in the league and kind of writ large, with the way he presented himself, the way he carried himself, the tattoos, those sorts of things?
I always thought, even at the time of Allen Iverson's prominence in the league, that he was representative of his generation. And I've seen that sort of in my 22 years in the league, that it's not so much that necessarily a player comes along and that player is unique in terms of society. What I generally find is whatever the current hottest music is among that generation, whatever the fashion sense is among that generation, those players are representative. And I thought that was the case with Allen. I mean, he was sort of at the forefront of hip-hop in terms of music, in terms of his personal style. He was certainly a change, but again, he was very representative of what was happening in society. And I think that, I think people came to understand that he shouldn't be judged necessarily by his tattoos, by his hairstyle, or anything else. And I think fans had enormous respect for him because, once again, they knew he left everything on the court, and ultimately he was judged by his passion for the game.